My parents, that happened at the end of the day. My parents were told that they had to be in court the next morning and had to find a lawyer. So that's where the whole nightmare started, right there from the beginning. It should have never gone past day one. From then on, that's when the court started. Justina, we couldn't see her for it was almost a week. The first time I remember going to see her, we were told that only 2 people could go in to see her at a time. Justina requested to have myself and my sister Julia to go up first. When I got up there after seeing her for a couple minutes, and it was really hard because I hadn't seen her, a social worker came in and told us pretty roughly that one of us has to leave because a parent has to be in there. And at that point, all of us are over the age of 18 that, we're told that it was an adult that had to be in there. And so I had to be security escorted back down to the lobby so one of my parents could go back up. So anytime we went to Boston Children's, we had to be escorted by their security staff. I was actually kicked off the property for no reason. At that point, they were only letting 2 people, not letting us interchange. So I just waited in the lobby and gave my parents a gift to my sister. And I had, I think, 7 male security guards throw me off property for just sitting in the lobby waiting for my parents. But during that whole time, Justina, they stopped her treatment. She started getting deconditioned. One of the reasons why she was going in to go under the care, when somebody has mitochondrial disease, there's certain treatment you're supposed to give them when they get flu and type symptoms. There's like a fluid remedy and stuff. That's why they have to go inpatient so they can get, recharged and back up strong. They didn't do any of that. They neglected her. She was having flushes done. That's what, from her GI doctor. She had a port put in prior to going to Boston Children's. I think that was done October before, but they neglected her port. Anyways, that port, since then, it's failed, so she's had to have other procedures done. But, so Justina was on the neurology floor from that February until April, and then they moved her to inpatient psych with no inpatient diagnosis. We found out that she was given a psychosomatic diagnosis saying that she had somatoform, which takes months to years. You're supposed to rule out all medical first, which was never done. I guess that's how they hold on to these kids, but so Justina was up on beta 5 from April until January. And during this time when this whole thing happened, there was actually a thing on 60 Minutes saying that kids that have inpatient level, that need inpatient level of care can't even get it. So my sister's holding a bed from somebody that truly needs it when she shouldn't even be there to begin with. So during that time, she wasn't receiving any medical, and she's just sitting on beta 5, being isolated from even the other patients on that floor. So from that point, she was even being treated differently from other kids that are patients. And then from then she went to Wayside in Framingham, which is a behavioral facility. Justina's never had behavioral issues. Still doesn't even have that. And then from there she went on to the Susan Wayne Center in Thompson, Connecticut. And from there she finally came home. But the whole thing should have never even gotten to that point. During this whole thing, she was denied education. The town of West Hartford offered to pay for tutoring for her. They wouldn't let her have it. The hospital and CF, they wouldn't let her have it.
Sorry, Jennifer, I know you said it to me, but I want to emphasize. So,
Sure.
West Hartford, where you're from,
Yep.
offered to pay tutoring for Justina while she was under the care of DCF.
Yes.
And DCF said, "Niet, we don't want it."
No.
So they denied her tutoring.
Yes.
Did they give a reason?
No.
Because they can't.
So, yeah, they denied her education. We're Catholic. They wouldn't let her go to church. During this time, there was Christmas, Easter. They wouldn't let us even see her, like her sisters, at certain times. I even offered, I was just trying to think of loopholes and ways to help and see my sister. I offered to even take custody of my sister and move to the state so my sister could be out of, this awful system of what was going on. And I was always under the impression that you're supposed to keep a child with their family or relative. Nobody would listen to me. I approached the judge about it, the GAL, her attorney, the DCF workers, the DCF lawyers, nobody. So I just try to help as much as I possibly can, to be there for my sister, to be there for support for my parents. It's just, this whole thing was like a nightmare. I kept feeling like it was like a bad, Lifetime movie that you just can't wake up from. They also wouldn't let her see any of her friends. The first time she saw and spoke to her friends was her 16th birthday, which was the day you had that big rally. Even that, they played with us, if they knew that was going on and they were trying to make it torn, that, that was a mess. But during the time that Justina was on Beater 5, she was having medical problems. I remember one of the situations was around my birthday on Labor Day. She had pneumonia, and they ignored it. They said, and then they even said, that was on that Friday, I went up with my mom that day this year. You could tell she was not feeling good at all. She had a fever. The nurse that was there even, said she had a fever. And they still made her go to, do groups and things, and not letting her get any medical care. They were supposed to contact us if she got worse, and she did, and they never let us know. But
Jennifer, let me ask you this.
sure.
If you don't want to answer it, I understand. I understand that the people involved who essentially kidnapped your sister, that they were writing articles in medical journals trying to prove a theory about somatoform and how this is a real serious psychiatric disorder, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Do you believe that DCF was involved in a form of human experimentation, medical experimentation on your sister?
Yes, I believe Boston Children's Hospital uses DCF as a tool for them. In HHS's guidelines for health and human services, it states, this is just a small version, if a child is awarded the state, they can be used for medical research. The psychologist that diagnosed my sister was somatoform, and I think it was less than 12 hours when it's supposed to be months to years to diagnose somebody. She's one of the leading researchers for somatoform at Boston Children's Hospital, works under Dr. David Damaso, who's the psychiatrist who wrote the clinical textbook of somatoform and psychosomatic. And he actually has a blurb in the book that he has a hard time finding pediatric subjects, thank you. But I know that we kept telling them that we better not be doing research on my sister, and my parents would tell them that, but then things would come back. But, you start to think, why are they doing this? Or what's, the why, how is this happening? And I think it sounds crazy at first, but it's one of the only things that truly makes sense. Why would they want my sister? I know that there's been been told there's been some papers and stuff, but yeah, I don't get how they can get away with you taking somebody's life away like this and just using them for what they want.
Jennifer, when we spoke, you stressed how Justina is now 17, but because of the neglect and the maltreatment, that her health in some ways deteriorated afterwards, that she had to have a gallbladder removed, other things removed because of the neglect. How is your sister doing now, and what's the prognosis? What's the medical outlook for her? How's her health?
We're just being positive at this point. The goal is, to get her back up to where she was, to get her to be able to sit, stand, and walk on her own. She currently still cannot do that. She needs assistance to transition from chair to wheelchair. Sorry, it's hard because my sister was not this way before this whole thing happened. When she was 14, I actually taught her in skating. That's what I do for her. She had to have her gallbladder removed about a month ago because it stopped working. Part of that, I believe it all comes from the neglect that happened to my sister under the care of Mass DCF. They neglected her port. At one point, she had, I think there's a picture somewhere of those lines that were coming from it. So that port was working prior to this whole situation. And that was even something we tried to avoid having done when she was at Tufts because it's, a pretty major surgery, but unfortunately she, exhausted everything else, and that's what had to be done. It's not a procedure my parents were forcing doctors to have. It was highly recommended from the specialists, so my parents were just following orders. So she had to have that removed. She had an ileostomy done. Her colon stopped working, and for a 17-year-old to have a bag, it's pretty sad. She is getting stronger. She's definitely, her spirits are up. She's a strong kid. That's part of what I think got her through this whole thing is she never gave up. She was asked for everybody to believe in her. But she's really fighting through. She wants to be back to where she was. She's going to school now.
Does she go every day?
Yep, she goes every day.
Does she go for a full day?
No, she's on a short day because she's still, to get back up, she missed that whole time she was in the state's custody. She wasn't allowed to have school. But yeah, she goes on a short day. She's getting caught up. And that's one thing that truly has upset her too, is because she knows how far behind she got. I don't know if everybody knows, but Justina, when she was little, had a stroke. So that's one of the other medical conditions she's had. And they actually tried to say she never had it, that it was all, in her head. But it shows on every scan. But one of the things from the stroke, Justina has short-term memory problems. So Justina has an IEP from the town of West Hartford saying what type of education she's supposed to have. She's supposed to have year-round schooling in a small environment, and that was all completely taken away from her during this time. So unfortunately, she's fallen back, and that's upset her because she's a smart kid, and to know that, But right now she's also she's starting therapeutic horseback riding. She absolutely loves that, and that's been helping her. She's doing some other therapy. She's been working with a great chiropractor who's been really good for her.
And apparently she celebrated Halloween, correct?
Yeah, that was the first time.
And you sent me a picture.
Yep.
Would you tell the audience what she was dressed up as?
She was Supergirl for Halloween. I thought it was really appropriate.
I thought that was so apropos.
last year she was in the hospital actually, and then prior to that she was here. So yeah, it's great for her to be able to do things that, you know, a normal teenager would be able to do. Like one of the things I told you, this whole thing happened when Justina was 14. She feels that, you know, everything that was taken away from her during this time, including all the years from her life, her teenage life, she's, you know, said to us, and especially to my mom mostly, that, you know, she still feels like she's 14 because, you know, that's where we left off. And, you know, if she could still, that we're just building back from there. And
So she's 17, but in many ways,
17. But
she
yeah.
wants to get those 3 years in a sense that she lost.
Exactly. So we try to make up for lost time as much as possible with doing special things and what we can do. But yeah, all those things that, you know, some kids would probably not, would take for granted, those things were all taken away from her. Birthday parties, sleepovers, those fun things during that time. Like for me, just taking, like one of the things I like to do with her is just going on like little shopping trips and stuff. So she's my little sister, I'm supposed to spoil her. So, but yeah, so.
Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you very much, really, for sharing this with all of us. Let me open it up a little bit now. Representative O'Connell, you've been leading the way. You've been decrying what's been going on at DCF for years, you and obviously Representative Lyons. You just told me before we even started the event, you got, was it an email from somebody, another person just plucked, very similar like Justina Pelletier? Could you?
Right, so I received the email, and I don't know if the person's here tonight because she did want to join us this evening and is having a similar problem with DCF. She says, now, I of course don't know any of the details at all, but it's just disturbing to hear from another person that thinks they may be having the same problem as you had. And I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. I know Representative Lyons was heavily involved in getting your sister back home to you guys with your parents. But talk about an upside-down universe where parents who are trying to get the best care they can for their child, and their child is taken away from them. And there's so many people, I think, here tonight that have stories that are exactly the opposite, where you see a child that should be taken away from parents. All the children that we have seen that have died in DCF custody, or who were left with their parents that shouldn't have been left with their parents and have died, and we're not taking them away. It's just backwards, upside down, and warped sometimes at DCF. And we know that, you know, over the past few decades, there's been problems at DCF. They've tried to be corrected over the years. But I think the last 8 years really did a number and just put the nails in the coffin and destroyed this agency more than we've ever seen because of the lack of leadership, the mismanagement, people like Olga Roche being in charge when they should not be in charge. Jim and I were the first ones out there calling for her resignation after the Jeremiah Oliver story, when no one else would. You know, we need more people to step up to the plate. And I think, you know, this management, this DeVal Patrick's philosophy, it just created this atmosphere in which people were not doing their jobs. They were cutting and pasting information. People were not following procedure. Some of the folks on the front lines of DCF workers, they're good people, they're hard workers. They weren't getting the support they needed from their supervisors. There was no consistency all across that agency. And these led to all of the problems that we're still seeing today, leftovers from the Patrick administration. You know, Jim and I work hard in the legislature to try and fix some of these things. During the Patrick administration, there were budget cuts to the DCF budget line. But at the same time, the budget was growing 33% over those years. Spending on what? On priorities, on things for, as Jim likes to say, the power brokers and their priorities. Deval Patrick redoing his office at the tune of $11 million. Investing in climate change things at the tune of $50 million. And at the same time, not bringing DCF back up to the funding that they should have had. And all of this, I think, led to this philosophy that doesn't work, and it's where we put the rights of the parents, not parents like your parents, but parents like Jeremiah Alder's parents first, and we don't put the best interest of the child first. And I think in your case, the best interest of Justina was not put first either. Unfortunately, she was taken away from you when she shouldn't have been. We see too many kids left there when they shouldn't be. When we don't put the best interest of the child first, they're left in these homes with drug-addicted parents, substance parents who abuse different substances, who neglect them, who abuse them, and we give these parents chance after chance after chance to straighten their lives out, to get their lives back on track. The kids go back with them, the parents are not ready for it, the kids come back into DCF. It becomes this revolving door where we are doing our children no justice. Then we see this generational system where you have their children are now in DCF custody, or DCF is involved. So if what we can do is put the best interest of the child, which is what we should always be doing, we will see kids getting out of these homes and put up for adoption, which they should be. We shouldn't have them linger in DCF for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, because that is what happens, and that is what destroys these kids so that they have no chance at a great life. If we can get them up. And then doing that will also eventually solve the other problems that we see, like not enough foster homes. We know that there's not enough foster homes out there. Some of these kids are so difficult. They have so many problems because they've been in such dysfunctional homes. Some of them are the dysfunctional foster homes as well. That people aren't willing to be foster parents any longer. DCF has a bad reputation. People aren't willing to be foster parents any longer. I think they're trying to repair that. They're trying to work on this backlog of foster home applications they have. But it all starts, I think the core is the best interest of the child. And that is what Massachusetts has to do. That's what where we have to get DCF going, rather than family reunification at all costs with these dysfunctional families that just cannot care for children. Families like Bella Bond's mom, who had 2 kids taken away. Bella Bond should never have been in that house, and she was left in that house because they give parents chance after chance after chance, even when they've screwed up the lives of all their other children.
Representative Lyons, Jim, let me ask you this. You've been dealing with DCF for years. You were, in many ways, a key person helping Justina get free. What is the biggest problem at DCF right now? Why is it so dysfunctional?
So I think it actually goes back to when Governor Patrick actually came into office in 2007. You have to really think back about what was going on in the legislature and in the government, and then the agencies that government is supposed to be running. At that time, in 2007, Sal DeMacy was the Speaker of the House. And at that point in time in his career, Sal DeMacy's big function that he wanted to do was to make money for himself. And he wanted to create a lobbying company for himself as he was leaving government. So his focus had nothing to do with taking care of these agencies. His focus was on using government to better himself and others, what we refer to as the power brokers on Beacon Hill. Then you have coming into the scene, you have a governor, Deval Patrick, whose primary interest was to create an environment of what I refer to as this radical social agenda. He was more interested in running an agenda than he was in providing services. So what you see moving forward is you see the corruption that took place in the legislature from 2007 to 2008, till ultimately when DeMacy left in 2009. So you've got a legislature that's not paying any attention to what the executive branch is doing. And then you have an executive whose primary interest is to promote a radical agenda, whether it be forcing Common Core onto Massachusetts, taking away First Amendment rights, the things that he was interested in, the lesbian, gay agenda, making sure that if people were in the adoptive process, that they had to be comfortable with that type of an environment. Someone who had the values that my wife and I would have in today's environment couldn't become a foster parent. So you have all of these things working at the same time, and you have an agency, DCF, that is simply out of control. There is nobody watching what they're doing. And it's become an agency that is just afloat in the ocean. And what happened in the situation with Justina is one of the most incredible things that I was ever involved with. About a year after she was initially taken, you read in the newspaper about this guy named Lou Pelletier, who was angry because DCF had taken his daughter away. And people were saying, well, there must be something wrong with this guy. Government's always right. They would never take away somebody. It's got to be Lou. I remember hearing this all the time. It's got to be this guy Pelletier. He's got to be crazy. Well, they say that about me too all the time. But I got to be crazy. So I got a call from Representative Mark Lombardo, and he had been on a conference call, and he had gotten the information about Justina. He called me up and said, Jim, we have to do something about this. And he told me the story, and I said, this is really, really crazy. So it was 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and I called the reporter from the Hartford newspaper down there, and he had been doing all kinds of background information from Connecticut, telling everybody what was going on with Justina. And I said, hey, and I'll never forget, I said, tell me about this guy. Is this guy Pelletier crazy? And he said to me, yeah, he's crazy, all right. He's trying to get his child back from a government agency that literally ripped him from the loving arms, as Pat Mahoney likes to say, of his mother and his father and his family. And I said, that's what happened, because you didn't know what happened. And then I got an opportunity to meet Lou. And when Lou tells the story, he's in the hospital on this day in February, and he objected to the fact that he wanted to get a second opinion. And he's sitting there at the table, and all of a sudden he said, security guards walked into the room, and he said, I want to see your child. You no longer have a right to see your child. I literally couldn't believe it. But that is exactly what happened. And I blame Deval Patrick and his agency for having the arrogance to come in and rip a child away from a loving family. At the same time they were taking away Justina Pelletier, there was 140 children that were missing under DCF care. So at the exact same time, they're taking away somebody whose loving parents are trying to get them help. They have no idea where 140 children are. The question that we asked as we move forward, we asked the administration, how much money did you spend to find those 140 children? We all know what the answer is. They didn't spend any money trying to find those 140 children. But at the same time, they were literally spending millions of dollars to keep Justina's parents and families away from her. The arrogance of this organization, DCF, under the leadership of Deval Patrick, is something that we all have to be concerned about. The fact that an agency can get that powerful and that so far removed from us, the people who want to take care of our children, is truly astounding. So I blame the legislature and I blame Deval Patrick. Those two agencies in the federal and the state government, the executive branch and the legislative, a corrupt government within the legislature that didn't care anyhow, and Deval Patrick, who simply wanted to show everybody that he was boss.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so let's talk about the legislature a little bit and what we've tried to do and what has failed. You know, I don't think you'll believe your ears when you hear this. Maybe, Jim, you want to talk first about the amendment for the second opinion.
So Representative Lombardo and,
It's called the amendment for a second opinion?
oh yeah, no, it was, so what happened was, just remember what happened now. Justina got taken away from her mother and father and her family for one simple reason. They didn't like what the doctors said. So they asked for a second opinion. And that's what precipitated the security guards coming in, taking that child away. So Representative Durant and Representative Lombardo filed an amendment to the state budget during last April. And it was a real simple budget amendment. It said, no parent can have their child removed or taken away if they ask for a second opinion.
Common sense.
I mean, right? How simple can it be? Because the legislator was telling us, we were trying to get the legislator to intervene. And they said, well, there's no law that we can rely on. Okay, well, we'll give you one. All the Democrats. How'd they vote?
Against.
Yeah.
It is.
So that's the kind of,
That's the moonbats for you, huh?
I mean, that is the kind of things that Shauna and I have grown accustomed to on Beacon Hill.
So, and there's a few more, and you know, obviously it doesn't stop us. We get up there and we fight for them anyway. I'm on the committee, Children and Families Committee, and we were talking recently. We know there's a huge drug epidemic across Massachusetts and across the country, and babies are being affected. Babies are being born addicted to drugs, and so the past couple of years, this has been a major subject for me and many people. I filed an amendment to say we will not let babies, drug-addicted babies, go home with drug-addicted mothers. You would think that would already be something, and sometimes they don't, but it's not a guarantee that they won't go home with drug-addicted mothers. Well, sounds like common sense, right? So you're going to see this theme here. What do you think happened to that amendment? That was rejected as well. And, you know, we got to vote on that one too. And it was hard to believe that people would vote against something as serious as that, something as common sense as that. So I was talking about this the other day at the State House because I'm still on that committee, and we were talking about how we need to consider the best interests of the child. And in Massachusetts, that they just don't have that philosophy yet. We've got to get there. We've got to beat it into people. Because I said, babies are going home with drug-addicted mothers. One of my colleagues actually said to me, well, sometimes that's probably better for them. You know, my mouth just drops to the floor. And so these are some of the people that are in the legislature representing you, and who Jim and I are fighting against every single day. There was another one.
If I could, Sean, before I lose this thought, because you know, I have a tendency to lose my thoughts. I want to bring you back to Lou and Linda Pelletier. And I want you to remember what Lou was up against at the time, that he decided to finally go public with this. They were threatening to put him in jail. He was under a gag order. And he was being threatened. If he said anything publicly, they were going to put him in jail. Just think about that. They were going to put him in jail. And if it wasn't for the courage of Mr. and Mrs. Lou and Linda Pelletier being absolutely relentless on getting that story out, who knows what would have happened. We had a meeting with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. It was Representative Lombardo and myself. And when we went into the meeting, we asked to have, this was in April, we asked that they would get Justina home. And we wanted to know why. And they told me, this is what they told us. Well, you know that there was some trouble in Connecticut, right? And I said, trouble in Connecticut, can you kind of explain that to me? Now, I had all the documents right there, and they said, oh yeah, they did an inspection, they had all kinds of problems down there. So I had the inspection report, and I said, well, there was no problems in Connecticut. So that's lie number one. And I said, what else? What's the other reason that you can't let this young girl go home? Well, that guy Lou, he's got quite a temper. I says, can you imagine holding every parent in America to that standard? You have a temper? The kids would never go home. That was the standard that they were holding Lou and Linda Pelletier to. Outrageous, outrageous. And if it wasn't for the strength of that family and the courage that they showed, this story has to stay alive. Everyone has to know, and that's why thanks so much for bringing us together
Oh, it's my
tonight.
pleasure.
Because-
Look, in fact, Jim, I mean, I didn't cut you off, but I remember that very point, because when we got Lou on the air, he had that gag order. And so I remember speaking to Lou, literally like a minute before we're gonna go on the air. And I said, Lou, listen, look, I'm with you all the way, buddy. Okay, well, I'll give you as much time as you want, and we're gonna do this thing. But you could go to prison. I said, I want you to understand that. And look, I feel conscience bound. I'm a devout Catholic, I have to tell you this. I know you got a daughter that's fighting for her life, but you also have Jennifer, you have other kids. If you go to prison, it's gonna hurt your other kids. I said, Lou, I want you to understand the consequences. He said, Jeff, if I don't do this, my Justina is gonna die. I said, Cooksey was then with us. I said, Cooks, we're getting him on the air. And we got him on the air, and I want to say this, honestly. I'm not saying this to stroke your egos or the audience. Okay, really, God is my witness. I believe that had Kuhner country not been so passionate about this issue, calling DCF, calling the governor's office, calling the state legislature, when we had that big rally up on Beacon Hill, 4,000 to 5,000 of you showed up. I believe that Justina Pelletier, God is my witness, would be dead today. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of Kuhner country. And honestly, that's the reason why I believe in this show. And I really want to thank all of them, because they showed so much guts and courage. So when people tell me we can't make a difference, we can. I've seen it. And so my big question is this, because Jim is 100% right. I don't want to see this repeated. This is a nightmare. This is a Lifetime, literally, Lifetime movie network. I've said this. This, Hollywood or Lifetime movie network. My question, really, to Shauna and to Jim is this. What needs to be done to reform DCF? In other words, let me phrase it this way. If I could make you emperor for a day, wave my magic wand, you're the complete king, queen of Massachusetts. You can fix DCF. What needs to be done to fix DCF?
Several things, but the most important, I will say again, the philosophy of the best interest of the child. And once we get to the best interest of the child, and that's what we're always dealing with, that's what we're always putting first, that's how we're making our decisions about whether or not to remove a child, or to leave a child, or to put a child on the adoption track, that will start fixing other problems that stem from that. That will start having children get back to their loving families, or get out of families that just cannot care for them, where they're being abused. And part of putting the child first, right now, when a child is taken from an abusive home, they have to go back and visit the parents that are abusing them. Now, if any of us were abused by an adult and we took out a restraining order, that person couldn't come near us. Yet, if you're a child and your parent's abusing you, and it doesn't matter if it's physical, mental, or sexual, you are made to go and visit that parent. That has got to change. We cannot terrorize these children by making them visit abusive parents. So when I say the best interest of the child, it flows down to so many things like that particular issue. So once we start doing that, we start taking care of everything that is wrong with DCF. We need to make parents comply with service plans. Parents right now, their kids will be taken away because they're on drugs, or they beat them, or whatever the case may be. They neglect them. They have service plans to comply with. They should be having drug tests to comply with. You can drug test them, but it's not consistent across the board. We should make them comply with those orders 100%. They are given a chance again and again and again. I'm working with a woman who's a foster mom, and she ended up adopting her kids. Well, when she was trying to adopt them, they gave the maternal mother every chance they could. And at one of the last hearings, where the kid was going to be taken away, they called the mother, and she was late in the hearing, and they said, we're all here. Oh, I overslept, I'm a little hungover. And can you just schedule it for tomorrow? And they did. They did. So, we are catering to these parents. How many people here wouldn't crawl across, fire or glass for your kid? And yet we are giving these neglectful parents that unfortunately will never be good parents chance and chance and chance. You know what? I truly believe if you can get your act together, if you can be a good parent, let's do that. But a lot of them can't. Let's get these kids up for adoption sooner so they're not totally screwed up for the rest of their lives.
Amen. Representative Lyons, Jim.
So I believe one of the things that we really have to do is make sure that, and believe me when I tell you, the first budget I voted for happened to be this year after being in the legislature for 4 years. I finally voted for a budget. I refused to vote for any Deval Patrick's budget because, quite frankly, I don't think he had any idea what he was spending his money on. But one of the areas that we have to make sure is that we fund it correctly. Right now, the level of funding has been cut by $125 million since 2009. And the caseloads within the Department of DCF, the number of children under one particular social worker really has gotten too high because the management in the middle has not been following any guidelines as to what should be done at the caseworker level. And I think accountability, we have to hold each particular office and each particular person accountable and follow up on a regular basis as to what's going on. People weren't even going, as Sean just pointed out, they weren't even going out to the houses. The fact that someone was arrested and was in the house with some of these young kids was never being reported. So I think we've got to revamp the entire system. I think we've got to go back when we do the intake, exactly get all the information that's available for the family and the children. And I think we really have to make sure that we fund it. We have to fund DCF properly and make sure that that's the priority of government as opposed to one of the other priorities that I've seen develop. Just to give you an idea, at the same time we're cutting $125 million over that 4.5-year period, Jeff. We're increasing the patronage-laden probation department by $25 million. Increasing the patronage-laden probation department by $25 million. At the same time, we're cutting DCF by $120 million.
That's right.
It's just
And then there's welfare for illegal immigrants.
That's right.
and
1.8 billion.
Housing and.
$1.8 billion. I've been in the top 10.
See, if those kids were illegals, it would have been a different story, but let that go.
At the same time, during the Patrick administration, 140 children were missing under the care of DCF. The pharmaceutical scandal, 75 people died during the pharmaceutical scandal. EBT abuse, which Sean O'Connell was the first one to ring, the alarm on how bad it was in the EBT scandals and all the money that was just going down the drain. State spending increased by $10 billion over the Patrick administration, and we're cutting money to DCF. The sales tax was increased by 25%. The probation department was used as an employment agency for the politically connected. And the top one on my list is the Justina being held hostage for 16 months. We can never, ever allow that to happen again.
And at the same time, Jim, 10,000 employees were added to the payroll of the state, but they were not put in DCF. They were Patrick's little minions, giving out, jobs to people he owed favors to, instead of funding and putting those people in DCF where they belong so we could lighten the caseloads and make children our first priority, and that did not happen the last 8 years.
Jeff, after, in December, there was a mass appeals court case that came down. DCF, there was a suit filed against DCF, and it was actually defended by Martha Copeland. She was actually defending DCF in her role as the Attorney General. Now, remember now, this is in December of 2014. This was after Martha was defeated, okay? Now, I want you to remember, she was the Attorney General for 8 years during this debacle of DCF getting slashed, kids disappearing. And this is why, I mean, I'm very partisan and we need to elect Republicans because Democrats just basically, a lot of them, particularly the power brokers, are interested in one thing and that's power. But this is what she said. The one-size-fits-all approach pushed in this lawsuit is not right for Massachusetts. However, she said much more work is needed to improve the troubled system. Now it is up to the next administration to put in place the needed reforms and resources to better protect our kids in foster systems and throughout DCF. Now this is the Attorney General that did nothing for 8 years, who's now lecturing us that we have to do better. I mean, it really is. The arrogance of the liberal elite in this state is truly breathtaking. I mean, they're the ones who allowed this to get out of hand, and now they're lecturing us about what we have to do to fix it.
So just between 2013 and 2015, there were 15 different reports with 238 recommendations on how to fix DCF. Those recommendations, some of them are now being implemented by the Baker administration, but most of those reports, be it from the auditor, the Office of the Child Advocate, have sat on a shelf for years collecting dust while the Patrick administration did absolutely nothing to fix this agency. Rather, they came to hearings, a little dog and pony show, told us that those 140 kids were accounted for. Remember that, Jim?
I do.
They said they were accounted for. We later found out that they were not accounted for. They had no idea where they are. So it was nothing but cover-ups and brushing it aside, calling it anecdotes, like they like to call everything. And, you know, it has resulted in devastation to some children.
Let me, we still have 10, 15 minutes left. Let me throw it open to the floor, ask any questions you like of anybody. Do we have a microphone? Go ahead. Let's start with, Reggie, go ahead.
My name is Doug Kuhner. It goes deeper than that. And based on my first-hand knowledge, I'm retired from the court system. I'm a sworn commission officer of the Massachusetts Trial Court, and I'm on the board of directors for the Mattapan State Hospital Project. Here's the problem. You've got DCF, you have the court, and you have the media. And here's what I say, when truth-telling in a court of law is more dangerous than drugging and raping scores of defenseless women, you got a big problem. You know what I'm talking about, the Cosby case. So when Mr. Pelletier went to court, he had no chance. There's an avalanche of attorneys and other medical people who are against the truth. Your father told the truth. It didn't matter. So the court needs to step up to the plate, and more importantly, if it wasn't for guys like you, this case, like you said, would never show up.
Right.
So you're one in millions. You're one in millions.
Right.
Jim Lyon, you're one in.
Right.
So it's a rigged system. And I say it based on first-hand knowledge. I see the missing link in the story is that the guy who headed up DCF before Roche is now the court-appointed administrator who's going to fix the court. Do you know that?
So let me ask, are the courts rigged? Is that a major problem?
I believe in the Pelletier situation, when I reviewed the court documents, to me it was absolutely incredible that this judge would not release her back to the family. So I believe within the system, the system itself, the way the information is given from the guardian ad litem and the attorneys is all geared to protect DCF. So I do believe that the system in that instance is that you go in at 5 or 10% opportunity to beat DCF. I think the system is definitely set up against families, absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. Go ahead.
One issue that no one has talked about so far is institutional corruption. So, for example, Justina was locked up in a facility that was owned by an outfit called JRI Incorporated, Justice Resource Institute International, which was started by Scott Harshbarger, and he was the president of JRI. At the same time, he was Middlesex District Attorney, and he was granting contracts to JRI to imprison juveniles at the same time that he was the Middlesex District Attorney. I actually went to the state archives to get the ethics disclosure forms to see if he disclosed that he was president of this outfit at the same time that he was the district attorney and giving contracts to JRI. But it turns out in Massachusetts, the day you leave office, they destroy the ethics disclosure forms. So, the role of JRI has not been adequately explored by anyone looking into DCF. You may remember the Pennsylvania Kids for Cash scandal. It also involved JRI. JRI has been involved in numerous other scandals in Pennsylvania where they abuse children in their facilities. And no one in Massachusetts, and I mean no one in Massachusetts has looked into JRI and the role it plays and the role money plays in, private contracts with private prisons to imprison children, and what sort of an incentive that plays into kickbacks with judges and GALs and the so-called child advocate industry.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to comment on that, or just thank you very much for that. Okay, I'll get to everybody, but go ahead. Let's move it around over there.
Right here?
Yes, miss, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know if you think that Baker is going to be helpful. Are things going to turn around?
I think Baker already has been helpful.
And what can we as individuals do?
Sure. The Baker administration walked into a mess. Every drawer they open, they find a bigger mess and a bigger mess in every single department. And this was one of them, unfortunately. Since they started, they have instituted different reforms. The most frequent ones, most recent ones that they instituted were to change the intake system, which hasn't been looked at in about 10 years, I think. So they're changing that so that they look at the intakes a different way and do a better job on that. They're getting more supervisors out there. They've created more positions so there are more eyes on these kids. So they really are instituting a lot of recommendations. And I know we all want this done yesterday, but unfortunately they're doing it. It takes a while. They're doing it as quickly as they can. We have seen more action from the Baker administration in the last 7 months or so than we ever saw from the Patrick administration. So they are aware of the problems and they are working on them as we speak.
Are they doing that one goal that you said, putting the children first? I mean, is that
That's
in
what,
front
when
of
Charlie
them?
came up with, sorry.
Yep, good.
No, the day he came out with the report, that's how he led the report, putting the kids first. I completely agree with Sean. I think Governor Baker and his team, they've analyzed the problem, and I am totally convinced that when we look at this DCF situation 12 months from now, it's going to be completely different than what we're talking about today. I mean, Charlie Baker not only is, I think, a terrific executive, he's got a real big heart, and he really, really does care about the best interest of these kids. So I am confident that we're going to see improvement across the board within DCF.
They are, and I think you also asked how you could help.
Yes.
And this goes to everyone out there. I mean, if you know a situation where you think a child is in danger, call the hotline. Do something about it. Too often we hear people say, oh, I thought there was something wrong with that parent. I thought that child was malnourished, whatever the case might be. Don't think twice about calling the hotline and reporting it. That's the only way sometimes we find out about this. And they do investigate every call that comes through that hotline.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you, Jim Lyons, that we should keep Justinia's story alive. And I want, if you can go over again, what was the research, the name of the research, what was the medication given to her, and also what was the mental thinking, the mental kind of thinking? Did her thinking change Those three questions, if they could be answered. And also, after that, why do you really think the main reason this happened? Your gut feeling.
Okay, and who, are you directing it to who?
To either Jim Lyons or to Christine.
Okay, either Jennifer or Jim.
Can you repeat the part?
What was the research that they were doing? You mentioned the name.
I don't know exactly what research, it could have been,
It was on somatoform.
there could have been a somatoform, but there was other things with GI too, so there's,
So that's the name of the drug?
no, that's, the psychosomatic thing they labeled her with. Somatoform disorder. It's a, yeah,
And what kind of medication was they giving her?
Nothing.
no
I
medication.
thought they were giving her.
No, they took her off with everything, including,
Took her off everything.
yeah, including her heart medication, because she has tachycardia. That was one thing that came up actually in court. Her heart rate resting was 152,
Oh my God.
and it had an H next to it, and they were ignoring that she had high heart rate. So,
They had to be doing something else, the reasons for that, you know, there has to be reasons.
we kept thinking that the whole, a lot of this just makes no sense why they would do this
Yeah,
to
I mean,
somebody.
what she's asking is, I think really, she's asking, I think it's kind of a Hollywoodish question, but she's not. Why did they do this? Why? Like, in the end, why?
Well-
I think DCF was helping them, I don't think it was the reverse.
So there's an interesting thing out there that we haven't touched upon, but we began to do some research on how often this happens at the hospitals. I think Bernie brought it up earlier about looking at the institution and whether or not it happens. And it's difficult to get information because of the HIPAA laws. But one thing that we did find out in our initial thing was, I think there were 5 or 6 cases where the child has been taken away. And one of the interesting things about those 5 or 6 cases that we found initially was they were all from out of state.
Yeah.
And the reason that that's significant is because there's these laws that you have to go right back into court and you have to try to get your child back. Well, if you're from out of state, you don't even have an attorney. And that's what happened with Lou and Linda. They were told on an afternoon, we're going to be in court tomorrow. And they don't even have an attorney to be able to make their case. So I'm not sure why, in getting the information, we asked the House Post-Audit Commission to do an investigation. David Linsky, we asked them to do an investigation of this. They refused to do it.
David Linsky stood up and said there was abuse in the home.
Well, I mean, look, you know, like when they make this movie, and they really should, at the end of the, Lifetime Movie Network or Hollywood is always like, Hollywood scene. Why? Here's my theory. It's just a theory. I think the people at the psychiatric ward, the psychiatric division at Boston Children's had a financial motive through grants to prove their research about somatoform. And so they needed human guinea pigs. And you combine that with the fact, as Representative Lyons said, they were from out of state, so it's much harder to fight in court, and you have a perfect storm. And so they looked at Justina and they said, aha, we're going to prove that she doesn't have mitochondrial disease. We're going to prove, no. Our research is right. We're going to keep the grants coming. We're going to keep the money coming. They were basically, I believe, experimenting on her.
The psychologist then,
I mean, experimenting, I don't mean like Mengele, I mean experimenting on taking her off all her medication to prove that there's nothing wrong with her, nothing physically wrong with her, it's all in her head, it's all psychosomatic, it's all somatoform, and you know what? Here's case exhibit, here's exhibit A, Justina Pelletier. And the problem was then they were caught. Because every week and every month, she got worse and worse and worse. And the worse she got, the more potentially liable they could be. So they don't want to admit they're wrong, so they hang on and hang on and hang on. And then before you know it, 14, 15, 16 months go by, she's almost on her deathbed, she's really sick. There's tremendous now media pressure. Frankly, there's people like you protesting up on Beacon Hill. You've got Jim Lyons, you've got Sean O'Connell, you've got Marco Lombardo, and they're going, oh my God, we've got a real mess. Okay, let her go. Let her go. Nobody's been held accountable. Nobody's been fired over this. I'm sorry. I'm listening to her. She's a great police. She's a wonderful sister. She's very calm. If this is a 17-year-old kid, they took her gallbladder out of her. She's not walking properly. She lost 3 years of her life. They effectively tortured this girl. Nobody's been fired? Nobody's been held accountable? Forgive me, are you freaking kidding me? And then when you ask for an investigation, no, my friends, enough is enough. It's time to clean house. And let me just say something else. This is, I believe, the problem with DCF. Frankly, it's the problem with this country. Nobody, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump, but nobody gets fired.
Right.
Nobody says, you're fired. That caseworker who oversaw the Bellabon case, who cut and pasted that information and doctored that file, at a minimum, he, she, them, I don't know if it was 1, 2, or 3, gone, fired, and don't let the door hit you on the way out, at a minimum. So no, I think it's time that we start holding people accountable for what they did. Because I'm telling you, the next time, the next Justina may not be so lucky. They may die in their care. And so that's why we got to say enough is enough. Go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
Just to follow up on that, when we sat with the Health and Human Services Secretary, we asked that question. We said, now, we want you to tell us who the people were in the room that made the decision to take Justina away from her family. How did they, what were the questions they asked each other? Silence. Silence. There is no information about, was there a meeting? Was there a decision? How did you arrive at the decision? Nothing. Nothing. So in the United States of America, led by Deval Patrick in Massachusetts, you can take a child away from your parents, and when you ask who made the decision, they don't give you an answer. That's what happened here. They don't give you an answer. That's crazy.
Jennifer, you want to say something? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
2 things. With that, our family, there was never an investigation. My mom actually invited the DCF workers over to our home in Connecticut for dinner so they can do a home inspection. They never even came to our home. They never interviewed me. There was nothing. So I don't know how they could, make a judgment call on this whole thing without even talking to us. Also, with what she was asking before, the psychologist had some sort of research or something too, that 1 out of 2 pediatric patients have some out of form. So she was trying to say that there was that.
1 out of 2 patients.
1 out of 2 pediatric patients, yes.
Oh my God.
So it's 50%.
50%.
One of my kids says,
Yeah, one of mine. All right, I've neglected the middle here a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hold on, we'll get you the microphone.
You say children are being sent back to highly dysfunctional families, and I don't deny it, or I don't doubt it. But children are also being taken from functional families and even adopted out. And I know many cases of that. This goes back decades before Deval Patrick, and I know people my age who suffer from DSS type abuse. As for the medical thing, I ran into a young woman at one of those things you had, where she said she came from a family with rare disease and that she herself had been used for medical experimentation or observations when she was a teenager. So I think that there is activity for medical research on children. And in fact, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it was happening in New York State and in California, where they were doing research on babies and children in people's homes. So for me, I think this reflects dark forces which are deliberately creating chaos and suffering from us by taking kids from nice homes, giving back kids to bad homes. And I think this will continue till we face this dark force. And that's about what I could say.
Thank you very much. Look, it's certain, the world is upside down, there's no question about it. Let's go to the gentleman, literally, the gentleman right beside you. Make it a two.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that there were some of these kids from out of state. How many other kids from out of state or not? Can you get a big picture, how many are handled that went to the same doctors? And those same doctors, I wonder, is there some way you can get their licenses? No one's talking about taking licenses from doctors. At some point, this is a crime. It isn't bad judgment, bad medical judgment. This is a crime. And pull their damn license. And that would be just a simple thing to do. The psych drugging of kids in school has gotten out of hand years ago. I don't know what the state of it is now. My kids are probably out where I need to worry about that. But that was a serious problem. They tried to put kids on various kinds of psych migraine pills, including ones that the Marine Corps will normally take you on if you've been on any drug, if you've been in a psych drug, if you've been on it for 2 years. But there were a couple of them. One of them was Zoloft, and another one. If you've ever been on it, they don't even want you to dig latrines. They just don't dare have you. But of course, the VA people, when you come back, they'll gleefully put you on Zoloft because the drug industry makes good money for it, and they don't care how dangerous or dysfunctional you might permanently be. Whereas your sister put on any psych drugs at all, even though they've taken her for other medicine, because that's what psychs like to do. And they are totally out of control and need to be reined in. The medical industry in general does not want to cure anything. They want you hooked on services and products. There's compelling information that there's all kinds of cures for all kinds of cancer, and there's some of it making around on the internet now by some fairly reasonable doctors and reasonable scholars behind it. There's a Dr. Stephanie Sanis. She's not a medical doctor, she's a research scientist at MIT. And a lot of schools normally move you out if you've got your bachelor's there and your other degrees. All her degrees are from MIT. She's a senior research scientist. She tried to get a paper written on statin drugs in the laboratory, like that, which is huge money maker, into American Medical Journal, where in America we've got money controls the journals. It finally got published in the British Journal. She's a fascinating lady. She speaks very well. She's insanely bright. You can find her on YouTube.
So let me ask you.
Anyway, what can you do about these doctors? Because I don't think they're harmless at all. I don't think they're innocent at all.
Jim, I mean, can we get licenses removed? How many of them were from out of state?
So Shauna and I sent a letter, we mentioned it earlier, to the House Audit and Post Audit Investigation Committee, just to ask that very straightforward question. We want to do an investigation of everything that took place in Justina's case. And they stonewall. They will not engage in any kind of investigation. So we have an Attorney General, Martha Coakley, who was the Attorney General through this whole time, and she's putting it at the feet of the Baker administration while they sat by and did nothing. I mean, that's the real problem on Beacon Hill. You have a closed system, and when something goes wrong that they want to protect, it's almost impossible to get the information.
Was your sister put on any psychological medication or something?
No, not that I know of. But two other things. One was.
I'm surprised because they love to do it.
Yeah, no, I know, that's
So she doesn't really know?
great, but
Because I never told anybody.
the day that Justina was moved to Bader 5 was the day another child was discharged from there that was from out of state. So Justina got the bed of another kid that was from out of state. And also, in regards to Martha Coakley, we did go to her office, we did speak with her staff, and she was totally aware of this whole thing and did nothing.
The gentleman in the middle.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say, wow. I really feel like I'm in the 1600s in Salem, Massachusetts, in the witch hunts and the trials. Unbelievable. My question is to Jennifer. Has your family sought legal counsel for this?
You mean moving forward?
Some kind of lawsuit, some kind of legal action against the state of Massachusetts, the medical facilities,
You'll have to
individuals?
talk to my dad about that.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to get
That's
personal,
fine.
because the one question, I should say, when you first shoot that,
they're only liable for $100,000, no matter what.
Okay, it's, to me, I
I'm
don't care
no
about the
lawyer.
monetary.
I work for
Monetary.
Jim, do you know that, are they only liable for $100,000?
No, there was just a $31 million settlement for children that were wrongfully taken against the state. So,
Oh,
no,
okay.
You can get.
You can sue them and you can
Yeah.
win, you can win big money.
Yes, there was just a $31 million settlement.
$31 million
It wasn't a
settlement.
settlement, it was an award.
An award. Maybe your dad should, look into this. No, I mean, really?
Yeah, no, we just can't really talk about it.
I'm sorry, okay, sorry.
To me, I look at it like this, unfortunately, our government.
Sorry, sir, can you speak the microphone?
Yes, sorry about that. Unfortunately, our government only understands one thing.
Money.
And that's monetary value.
Right.
So if you can make them pay, they listen. As long as we don't make them pay, they will not respond to anybody. The fact that your sister was denied the fundamental ability to go pray is unbelievable. I cannot believe that. We got vicious criminals doing life sentences that are entitled to go and find God and carry their Bibles to the prisons. And your sister, she's in a medical facility, denied the ability to do a prayer. Unbelievable.
Not even that, I'm not trying to get everybody's blood pressure up, but Tsarnaev, literally, flashback, is guaranteed a prayer rug and a Quran.
God.
And if he wants to see an imam for spiritual religious guidance, okay? This is the Boston Marathon terrorist bomber. But,
See his family.
and he can see his family, by the way. He's got visitation. But her sister, couldn't have a priest, couldn't attend Mass, couldn't celebrate Easter, couldn't celebrate Christmas. My friends, there's something rotten in Massachusetts.
There's no question, again, it's mind-boggling, it's twilight zone, that somebody in a medical facility is denied such a fundamental, actually, our country was based on that, right? The ability to go to church and pray.
Amen.
The persecution we left Europe and we're denied.
Yeah, actually, my grandmother, my grandparents, my mom's side is from Czech Republic, from Prague. My grandparents left communism when all that was going on. My grandmother is almost, she'll be 95
God
in
bless her.
January. She said this is worse than what she saw going on there. My grandmother lost all her property, everything. And my grandmother couldn't even see my sister during this whole thing either. But to answer your question too, I do believe all these people that put my sister in harm's way should all be held accountable for what they did, so they cannot do this again.
Thank you. To the woman, the $31 million settlement, the woman who gave us the $31 million award. Go ahead.
First of all, Jeff, are you aware that Boston Children's Hospital takes hotlines over 400 children a year? So that means every day, 365 days a year, at least one of the kids who goes to Boston Children's Hospital for medical treatment could end up like Justina Pelletier. And when we were standing in the State House with you, thousands of us in the street, they were taking other children. This Justina Pelletier scenario is happening every day in Massachusetts and across the country. And I disagree with the remedies that are being done in Massachusetts to address this. I don't know if you people are aware of how much federal funding influences this, but when the federal government says that I will pay you for every apple you bring to me, you're gonna go and round up apples. Well, that's what they're doing with children. The statistics of the children that are being taken from homes of loving families, 1 out of every 18 kids needs to be removed from their home. The trauma that is going on in these families, today is the anniversary of one case I'm working on where her child was removed by a SWAT team. And the reason that the SWAT team was sent out was because they claimed they weren't following the service plan. It can be proved that they were. There was absolutely no basis for it. The trauma, the devastation, when these kids are taken, and I don't know, Jeff, if you're familiar with the DOJ case that came out in January, but it was very clear. The DOJ could pick any case across the country. They picked a case in Massachusetts. The circumstances of that case that the DOJ found Massachusetts guilty of guilty of taking children that should never be taken. The circumstances were they took this child 2 days after birth. It was 2 years later, and the DOJ this past January demanded that Massachusetts return the child to the grandmother, and mother had disabilities, and return the child, and also pay for expenses and costs and whatever. But what had Massachusetts been doing the 2 years from after they took that baby at 2 days old? For that 2 years, that mother and grandmother were allowed, if they were lucky, 1 hour a week visitation in disgusting DCF offices, supervised. That's not reunifying families. But here's the real kicker that I want everybody to understand is going on. They are forcing adoption and adopting children out from loving families all day long. And it is disgusting, and the DOJ happened to pick a Massachusetts case, and so we all know, and it's proven, the DOJ investigated it. Massachusetts was adopting that child out while that grandmother was fighting tooth and nail to get that. The same thing is happening to this woman right here. However, Massachusetts has been ordered by the DOJ to stop doing this, and not one thing has changed. Case after case in Massachusetts. There are right now thousands of children that you can read the statistics are ready to be adopted. Only problem is the parents' parental rights haven't been terminated yet. So you can go and sign up for a kid, and then the government will help you get that kid. They will force adoption on loving families, and I can't think of anything more disgusting that our government can be doing. And it's happening like rampantly across the
And
country.
they, just to clarify, so they took that child 2 days after birth
Yes,
because the mother had disabilities?
yes,
And so, but the grandmother was saying, I'm gonna help out, and we're a loving family, and we
right.
wanna keep the
And
child.
hired and spent fortunes on attorneys, fought tooth and nail to get that child back. And if the DOJ hadn't picked that case, Massachusetts was adopting that child out to another family. And there's another premise I want to tell you that as far as best interest of the child, of course it sounds exactly like what we should be doing. But CPS, which is the generic name for all these different alphabet soup initials that every state has changed to, DCF, DHR, DSS, you name it. It is so corrupt. It is so very, very corrupt that if we use that as the default position, best interest of the child, then we will continue with forced adoptions because those people have more money and can provide a better lifestyle.
Yes.
And that's what's going to happen. The system is so broken. CPS is so corrupt. You have social workers working against good judges. First of all, I want to go back to the first gentleman who spoke and said it starts in the court system. If our court systems weren't so broken, then everything that happened to Justine Pelletier could not have happened because it would have been nipped in the bud the second they tried to do that in front of a good judge. And as you all know, when the judge wrote his opinion of the Pelletier case, there was nothing there. His whole basis for justifying what had happened was because Lou Pelletier or both of the parents were angry. They weren't civilized or whatever. I mean, if you read his opinion, you would totally say, what is this judge doing sitting on the bench? You'd start at the court system.
He's a hack.
You'd start at the court system and Justine Pelletier couldn't have gone further. It would have ended in front of the judge. Since we're not going to fix the court system, please don't think that throwing money at DCF without gutting it is going to do a thing. It is so corrupt. And I wish that my legislators would talk to the people.
I'm retired from the court, but she's right. Without the court allowing this, it's gonna. You can put all the money in the world in DCF. No change.
Absolutely.
Business as usual, day to day.
All right, Sean, I want that, go ahead, shoot.
I just want to do one last thing. I beg my legislators to talk to the people that know what's going on in DCF. Because you're making very sound recommendations, but it's not going to fix it. Because we know what's really going on. We know what some of these, a good social worker, and there are good social workers, just like there are good judges, but far and few between, right? A good social worker will be pulled off a case if she's not towing the line to take that kid.
Right.
A good social worker, if she complains about what's going on in the department, will either lose her job or be retaliated against. There is no hope until we gut this system. But I'm begging my legislators to spend their time talking to people like this. This woman here, Lori Horton, knows this system inside and out, goes to meetings in Tennessee with the DOJ that brought the Massachusetts case. Everybody in Tennessee recently thought Massachusetts was golden because the DOJ picked us. And they showed that case, that children are being taken wrongfully, and this kid was being put up for adoption. And she's there to tell them, and she told the DOJ, nothing has changed. They're still doing the same thing. The woman sitting next to me is in the same position as they're trying to force the adoption, whatever. You gotta get down and talk to the people that are living the nightmare of DCF. You know, what happened to the Pelletiers is happening every single day. The only difference is they got their daughter back, quite damaged, and God knows, I mean, I anguished and cried for Justina Pelletier. I was at your rallies, I went to the hearings. I did anything I could because I knew until we brought public awareness to Justina's case and all the rest of them, it's just gonna go on. And I promise you that while we stood at the State House, they were taking another kid from Boston Children's Hospital. Over 400 a year are hotlined.
So you said a lot, and I agree with a lot of what you said. And I started this whole thing by saying this is an upside down, warped universe where we see children being left with parents they shouldn't be left with, and we also see children being taken away from parents, loving parents that they should not be taken away from. So both things are happening, and part of it is the courts. We haven't talked a lot about the courts tonight. Part of it is the courts as well, because they also make decisions. And then they'll say to DCF, you know, DCF will say, well, it's the court's fault, and the court will say, no, it's DCF's fault, and you know, you can't get to the bottom of it. But I do believe in the best interest of the child, because if you truly look at the best interest of the child, you will know that it was in Justina's best interest to stay with her parents, and that's the decision that should have been made. Bella Vaughn, it was not in her best interest to stay with her parents, so the decision should have been made to take her away from that mother. So the best interest of the child goes both ways. It doesn't just go one way.
All right, two more questions, and then we'll call it that woman right there. Go ahead. No,
I would like to add something.
yes, right there.
Yes, I've been fighting 26 months for my granddaughter now. The report was made right after my daughter giving birth to her that my daughter has cognitive delays and therefore can't parent. You want to talk about service plans? I have complained and filed grievances against her service plan because they send her to services for regular parents, not for parents with learning disabilities. We filed a grievance October 31st of last year. They met with us August 18th of this year. They had 21 days to file a legal response. We've heard nothing, and it's now going on 3 months. I have applied over and over again for placement of my granddaughter. I have spent tens of thousands of dollars. I have a second job just to pay the lawyer fees. I've gone to court, and I've had the judge refuse to hear the case where I applied for guardianship because it's not proper, because DCF has custody. And DCF alone decides where the child should live. She's been a pre-adoptive home since January. I had applied before she went into the pre-adoptive home to adopt her myself, and DCF waited until they placed her with strangers and then found my application that they say they put in the wrong cabinet.
Corruption is.
And that was last year?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am now waiting to do a parenting assessment to prove that I can parent my own grandchild. My daughter had an IEP while she was in school. She's a high school graduate. She works full-time and supports herself. She's not on disability, but her learning disability is being used to say that she can't parent her child. And there's no reason that she couldn't parent her child in my house with me giving extra supervision, but DCF says she can't live with me and me can be considered for placement because she has an open case. Our case is now currently one of 15 cases under federal investigation by the DOJ due to the department's denial of equitable provision of services under Title II of the ADA. I filed the grievance long before I even knew of the other DOJ case, and it got ignored. So the DOJ opened my case for investigation in May of this year, but we've heard nothing because they're getting swamped by thousands of them.
And the damage
So
being
it sounds like it started in the Patrick administration.
No, no,
Yeah,
it's been
well-
going on well before that.
Well,
No,
my
your
granddaughter's
case.
been here for 26 months.
Right.
And my daughter, who was supposed to be able to prove during her 1-hour visit that she can parent her child, gets to see her once every 4 to 6 weeks.
Hey,
We're
Jeff,
not allowed to take her outside of the visiting room, and they falsify everything that happens during that visit.
False reports are in the record.
The very first visit, my daughter was handed a baby bottle and told, you need to feed this baby and you need to do so immediately. Well, Kaylee wouldn't take the bottle. And finally I said to the social worker, well, when did she eat last? And she said, well, 2 hours ago. I said, well, Kaylee eats every 4. She's not hungry yet. When we got that report, my daughter lacked the ability to even give her own baby a bottle.
They took
And
it.
every report has come down the pipe like that.
Stupid.
Thank you very much for that.
So the DOJ, after the ruling of the case in Massachusetts, gave out, the first time they've ever told states what to do in child welfare, they came out with technical assistance for the courts, for child welfare agencies that, and this was given higher up, commissioners, assistant commissioners, any social worker you talk to now dealing with the parents that have the disabilities, that are denied their rightful parenting rights, they don't know what this is. The information doesn't find its way to the social workers that are actually working with the families. And I did go to the conference on the successful parenting of parents with disabilities, because parenting can be done with accommodations. It's not an automatic, it's a discrimination if it's an automatic that you lose your parenting rights because of a disability. And they're congratulating us. Massachusetts, we had a handful of people from, and the actual family was there from Massachusetts. And they're congratulating us on how lucky our state does it right now. I felt like a hypocrite. Our state is not doing it right. Our state hasn't acknowledged this letter yet. They were supposed to answer it long ago. They asked for an extension, and nothing has changed. And I try to, I'm on a family advisory committee, the co-chairperson of the family advisory committee, which is somebody that has had interaction with the family, that tries to work on the inside to better the department by actually sharing what families go through that are working with DCF. And we seem to be being pushed out now, when if you want to know how anybody's doing, you ask the families that are going through it. And I just have to comment too, because best interest of kids, it's the safety of kids that are most important. And even your comment about baby Bella, we wouldn't have known then that her parent, I mean, DCF was in there, whether they copied or pasted or whatever. That parent was not at the position right then to lose her daughter. But if we strengthen those families, if we take
You couldn't strengthen a family like Bella's mother. I mean, she lost her 2 kids prior to that. She was a drug addict.
She was a heroin.
Keep your eyes on
heroin
that's a perfect, example of that was not the best interest of that child.
I mean, the father's a heroin addict. They're literally shooting up right beside the kid. The place is absolutely filthy. She's got a history of severe mental illness. And then apparently she says
that
that...
house was like that at the time the social workers went in there?
Yes. I mean, it's shocking. That's what I
But
mean.
even heroin addicts can get better in the best interest of the children.
No,
How long are we gonna put a kid through that while their mother tries to
No,
get better?
I mean, I'm sorry, I strongly disagree with that. Look,
I'm not saying they should have their children at the time they're shooting up, but what do we have recovery for then?
The
Recovery
last
for
thing
parents to get better
your
so
mother
that they
can
can.
do with a baby is take care of a baby while she's trying to recover from being a drug addict.
I'm not,
not gonna happen in 90
They're not
days.
considering relatives.
It's not gonna
Oh,
happen
and
in
they should
90
consider
days.
relatives, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's
relatives.
it, obviously,
Yeah.
aunts, uncles, grandparents, that to me is a no-brainer.
They have to get.
But I mean, you were so stoned, they were such junkies, literally, you gotta listen to this. She admitted it, she told this to the police who came in after they finally found out about baby Bella. And they said, well, he heard voices in his head that his dog, that Bella was a demon, and he had to kill the demon. So he went into the room, and he literally, he strangled her to death, he smothered her to death. And then she helped her own child cover it up and toss the kid in the trash bag, and then, dump it in Deer Island. Now look, I understand, believe me, really. I believe in second chances. I do. I'm a Christian. I really do. I believe in forgiveness and second chances. If you're a drug addict, and you really clean up, and you're clean and sober, and I know you're clean and sober, yes, I want you to have your child. But if you've been arrested 12 times, and you've been a drug addict and a junkie for year after year after year, and then you lost 2 of your other children, and you're hanging around with another heroin addict, and you guys are shooting up in the house, you gotta get that kid out of there.
And DCF knew all that before.
Yes.
And didn't remove
Did
that.
zero,
help.
did not.
They knew all that. So
In fact,
when
they
we
cut and
talk-
pasted information to try to hide that they've known it for years and years and years.
When we talk
Give-
about firing people, what we need is we need to prosecute people. We need a special prosecutor to go after anybody in DCF who does what was done to Justina Pelletier or any other of these children that have been forcefully adopted on fraud information, fraudulent.
At the
Imagine
doctor's
losing your
list,
child
too.
on lies. It's happening every day.
Yes, no, I agree with you. All right, final question. All right, this lady's been very patient. Go ahead, last question. They'll be available if you want to ask them questions and talk to them after, but go ahead. Yeah, we lost the microphone. Okay, I think we've lost the microphone.
I agree that sometimes adoption is best. But the social worker is a very, I had 2 nephews who were in DSM custody. One got adopted out, but his parents were told, my brother and his wife were told, either you sign the adoption papers or you'll never see them again. If you sign the adoption papers, you'll get 2 visits a year with them. Of which they never got those visits. And when it went to court, later on, when the kids were older and they were still fighting to try to get visitations, the judge said, well, the DCF lawyer didn't sign the paperwork, so therefore it's not, you have no rights to visit this child. And, I just want to say, I'm a nurse, I work nights. I had a neighbor file a complaint on me. The social worker came in. They were going to support it on me based on the fact that my 8-year-old had dirty fingernails. They never talked to my pediatrician. They talked to the school. My son went to a bus stop in the morning where it was in a complex. You probably know the place because it's in North Andover. In the morning, he probably got dirty. He took a shower every morning. He probably got dirty all day.
Right. And so it's just hard to hear the stories where you've got, 2 totally opposite ends of the spectrum and these things happen. And it's been, years and years of this culture where people aren't doing their jobs right. There's no consistency. There's not the right training. It's starting to change now, I think, under the Baker administration. They're bringing in more people. They're training everyone. I think over 80% of the social workers are now certified, whereas they weren't previously. I think there were 30%. So I think we're stepping in the right direction, but I know things happen that are wrong, and we're trying to fix that. The only thing we can, if you have stories like that, call your representative. We can help people. Let them know what's going on. Because I have people call my office about DCF all the time, and it's both ends of the spectrum. Either the kids should be there or they shouldn't be there. And we can try and facilitate that and try and help
But
people.
I'd like to see as a rehash, as a reform, a committee of people with common sense.
Good luck.
Cases, who review cases and say, yes, that makes sense. That baby should go and be adopted out at 2 months old. Because, the mother is never going to get her act together and things like that. Or, what's going on here? Why are you taking this child out of the hospital? Because the parents got a second opinion. Are you guys crazy?
But when you review a case, you're only reviewing what DCF, their perception or their
Exactly.
lies or their distorted truth in the record. You can't do a full review unless you talk to the
And
family
I agree
involved
too,
also.
incidentally, when my brother and his wife would have visitation, the social workers would lie about what happens at this.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, just a couple of things, very quick notes. There is a petition, if you want to end state funding, taxpayer funding of abortion. I'll be signing it. If you want to sign it, it's there. I also want to give a special thanks to Bill Kelly. He, as always, came through. We had to drive Jennifer up from West Hartford. Bill Kelly being Bill Kelly, I said, Bill, can you get her a car? You got a limo. So I want to thank Bill for his generosity. And today's town hall is brought to you by the Arsenal for the Arts and by Perfect Smiles, where comprehensive dentistry is beautiful, functional, and natural-looking dentistry. Above all, I want to thank Representative O'Connell, Representative Lyons, our special guest, Jennifer Pelletier, and I want to thank all of you, truly from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time out on a very busy Thursday to come to this town hall. This will be broadcast on the air. We're going to post it up on the website, so a lot of people will hear it. Thank you so much. God bless you.